All right. Let's get this out of the way first. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed on Tailboard Talks Firefighter Podcast are solely those of the speakers, guests, and host, and do not in any way represent the thoughts or views or opinions of any other employer, partnership, or sponsor. The material and information in this podcast is for general information purposes only and should be used at the listener's discretion. Let's talk about Team Builder. Team Builder is a fantastic platform for trainers, coaches, and I'm talking of any discipline, right? Sports teams, fitness stuff. If I was still going out to departments and trying to be their fitness person and come see them every couple months or come see them once a month, and I needed to take a department roster and then break that down into shifts and then be able to manage each shift by each person individually and track their progress and their weights and their activity. Team Builder is a fantastic app for that. Team Builder is all about managing groups. Obviously, it's geared towards fitness. Check it out. So go to teambuilder.com, teambuildr.com, and enter code TTFP, Tailboard Talks Firefighter Podcast. They want to give you a free 30-day trial of their platform. Go in, check it out. It's risk-free, no obligation, but see if you like it. Now, it's cool because if you were just going and checking it out, shopping around, it's a 14-day free trial. But because they dig the show and I like them, they're offering a 30-day free trial. So go check it out, teambuilder.com, teambuildr.com, and enter code TTFP for your free 30-day trial. Here comes the intro. Skip forward 30 seconds if you want to get right to the episode. This is the Tailboard Talk Podcast, the best health, wellness, and lifestyle resource for the fire service. We're using stories, lessons, and tips from the front lines to give a realistic view of what the job can do to us and how we can make it out alive. I'm Chris Morella, a firefighter since 03, medic since 05, full-time since 08, and promoted to lieutenant in 20. I'm also a personal trainer and strength coach, and I'm here to give you the best information and host the best discussions to make us capable and durable, both on the job and away from it. So grab a heater, steal some fancy creamer from First Shift, and let's go chat. Hey guys, Chris here. So I need to give a little disclaimer at the beginning of this episode. In it, Megan asked me a question, and it's part of a conversation, and we're kind of going back and forth, and I knew in the moment, as you'll hear, that I did not like my answer, and I didn't know exactly why, but then as we continued to talk, it was painfully obvious why it was a bad answer, and then as I continued to ask more people, and I put a few questions up on Instagram and got the feedback, I could not be more mortified by my answer, but like Megan says, this is why these conversations are important, because until I was made to actually articulate an answer, I really hadn't put that much thought into it. And it's only once we start kind of talking about it and figuring out how we actually think and feel that we can start to make some changes in the positive way. So I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you guys like Megan, because I'm definitely going to have her and some other females on in the future, and we'll be talking to them soon. All right, enjoy the episode. Look forward to me sounding like a terrible person. We'll talk to you guys soon. Where do you think you'd publish it?
Some people have recommended Firehouse magazine, but that has to be under 15,000 words.
Under how many?
About 1,500.
Okay. Excuse me?
Yeah, 1,500.
That's a lot of words.
Which is 4 pages-ish, which is not horrible,
4 magazine pages?
Yeah. Or 4 regular double-spaced pages.
Oh, okay.
So.
Do you have sections in it where you'd be able to do part 1 and part 2?
It is split up into sections, but I'd have to modify them a little bit.
Okay.
Because it's written in an educational way versus for a publishing.
Excuse me? Too stupid? Is that what you're saying?
No, well, they say it's not for educational purposes, is what they don't want it. They don't want a school paper turned in,
Right.
So. But
they don't want a textbook.
Right. But I'm looking at splitting it into different sections of what happens for infertility stuff, and then department requirements for once somebody's pregnant. What the heck are they going to do? So
do you feel we can jump right in. Do you feel as you were going through this, that you lean towards one aspect or another? You were I definitely care more about the policy side of it or the female side of it, or what did you start leaning towards?
Yeah, absolutely. I was definitely uneducated, and if you would have asked me 2 years ago, if you ever get pregnant, what are you going to do when it comes to work? And I'd have been my body's used to it. I'm young, I'm healthy, I'm going to work until my gear doesn't fit.
Yeah.
And now that I've done all this research, I'm like, nope, we'll be off in the first trimester, or at least try to be.
Whoa, yeah.
Which is not the norm for sure, and departments aren't ready for that. But
it's aggressive. Well, I think it's aggressive just considering what I only can think of one other person that we work with that I was around while they were pregnant, and I only saw her once in a while, but I think it went pretty far into her pregnancy that she was working.
Until the third trimester.
Really?
And she said that, like, it was a call that where she got, like, almost kicked in the stomach. And she was like, okay, like, it's time to stop. But super far into the pregnancy.
Yeah. Yikes. All right, so with that little preamble out of the way, you just got done with, how long did this take you? This is your master, not thesis, what did you call it?
A final practicum, a final paper submission.
Okay. And it's 40 pages
Yeah.
of all about how basically fertility and firefighting are like not best friends.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
How the fire service is going to affect you from the day you start to getting pregnant for females carrying through pregnancy.
Okay.
And what's going to happen after that.
And so first of all, why did you start leaning towards that? Because I'm guessing, what's your degree in?
Fire safety administration.
And so you can write a paper on traffic cones.
Yeah.
On
absolutely anything I want.
Anything you want, right?
Yeah.
And so how'd you pick this area?
Well, it really wasn't until I started here that I felt like so many guys that were trying to get pregnant and have babies were like struggling with infertility. And like there has to be some underlying issue that's correlating the two. Like, so what's the common factor between everything that affects it? And then once I started there, it just led into how it's going to affect through everything. And then for me, I was engaged at the time, and then we've gotten married since. So it's like, well, that's the next step in our family. So I should probably be educated about what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's the way it goes, right? Since we actually scheduled this thing, I've been thinking a lot about it because my initial thought was like, oh, this will be good. This will be really interesting and a lot of good information, right? And I never once thought like, oh, I wish I would have had this 8 years ago when we started trying. And then I was like, well, it's because I'm thinking about it now on the other side of it with almost 4 and almost 2-year-old, right? But it made me think of all the times when we were going to appointments and like the diagnostic process for both of us and all that stuff. I was like, this fucking sucks. Like, this is the last thing I want to be doing. I don't have any interest in this part of it. I remember telling Katie, like, we had to be very careful about how I would talk about it, how we would talk about it, of like, I don't want to do this anymore. And what we're talking about is like the process, because this process sucks. I want to get to the end result of having kids, right? But going through it is just miserable. And it just got so stressful for us and so bad. And it took us probably, total time, probably 5 years to figure out how to have one, right? And then once we had the method, then we figure out the second one. But God, dude, that process was miserable. So it's very easy for me to look back on now and be like, hey, this is good information for everybody. But I could certainly see, trying to think back that much time, I have no idea how I would receive that information or this information we're going to talk about. Like, I have no clue, because it was so strange that we were going to have to go through that. And then, like you're saying, the more and more people you hear of, like, what did we estimate before? And we were kind of talking like a third has had some sort of issue of varying degree, right? And I think we're going to talk about some stuff that's people are like, that's obvious, but I'm glad we're talking about it. And I think once if we get into much of the policy side, it's going to be like, oh boy, like this is a tough one.
Yeah, people are definitely not ready to talk about it. That's for sure. Or they're turning a blind eye. It affects the policy side, at least affects a small amount of people. And when it came to the infertility and the initial stuff, it was deciphering whether the whole world as a whole was talking about infertility more, that it's just more of a conversation now, or if it is directly actually related to the fire service and if there's any direct correlation there.
Okay, so how did you start going down and differentiating between general population and fire service? Like, is there that much? In my mind, I can't believe there's that much research on just firefighters. True, or
no, absolutely. So where I started research was I identified some what I thought initially as career hazards, like what we are automatically disposed to and cause a potential for risk. Our standard things of sleep deprivation and cancer, all that stuff. So I looked at the causes for that, and then I was able to find more specific studies about heat exposure, not necessarily the fire service, but what heat exposures have to do with infertility,
Sure.
and what noise exposure has to do with infertility, and how sleep affects infertility. So I started there and was able to draw the conclusions back to the fire service.
What's the noise exposure one?
Yeah, so I was definitely surprised about that one. So noise actually makes a big difference, and then you start thinking like, well, do pregnant people go to concerts? Do pregnant people go do that stuff?
Okay.
And so, basically anything that affects infertility is also not going to be beneficial for a pregnant lady.
Right.
It's going to cause some detrimental factors to occur. So, noise with our tones going off, that cortisol dump, the stress, everything, all the hormones that get released from the noise is going to cause some negative impacts.
So just the stressful incidents alone have a negative connotation for your heart.
Yeah.
And me, let alone 2 hearts and or an attempt at a heart in a female, right? Did you get to a point, because already, like, if I was listening to this, I'd be like, okay, noise, right? So did you get to a point where, like, you're hyper aware of everything then, and you're like, nothing's safe and almost too sensitive about it, when you're like, okay, I got to remember I'm still a durable person? Did you get to a point where you had to, like, reel it back in and be like, okay, not everything's a threat, like 10 out of 10?
Yeah, for sure. And you just get down the rabbit hole. You know how the internet is. You click on one thing and it leads you to another,
Yeah.
So it's definitely taking a step back. I think once I'm in a different situation, if I were ever to get pregnant, then I'm going to definitely be more nervous while I'm still on shift than I would have been if I wasn't knowledgeable.
We even saw pushback, though, from, like, the chemicals in our gear, right? The AFF or the IFF came out and said, like, yeah, these are cancer-causing agents.
Yeah, the PFAS.
Yeah, and they're not going anywhere.
No,
also, by the way.
It's there. Deal with it.
So they had their whole position statement on it, right? And if you read the comments of any post like that, guys were like, of course, what doesn't give you cancer? Water gives you cancer. Who cares, you know?
Right.
And that's a major thing that we are in contact with every shift day several times. So if you take a more disconnected thing where, unfortunately, even if you are connected to it through your intimacy, you're not going to admit it a lot of times, right? It's not going to be like this talked about thing with a lot of guys in the male-dominated society or the male-dominated field of the fire service. I mean, I can't imagine that you're going to get much like, oh yeah, we'll take a look at the tones now because there's a potential negative effect on something we don't have any clue about.
Nor should that stuff change. And that's part of that's the thing that people have to accept, is just being educated about the risks that are there. And unfortunately, a lot of them are not going to change. They're uncontrollable factors that I don't want to say are the way they are, but we can't change that tones go off and our body has a stress hormone reaction that releases a bunch of stuff in our body. We can't control that. And you guys have talked about it, the cortisol dump, in the middle of the night, getting up and working that stuff off. We can't control how our body reacts to something we need for our job.
Right.
But it's the same as limiting time in our gear, not working out in our gear. Yeah. Anytime we don't have to be sitting in that stuff, from the release of all the chemicals in there, from the heating up standpoint, from all of that, just limiting that time.
Kurt and I have done episodes on not working out in fire gear. I don't think it's going anywhere. I mean, it's too cool looking not to do. I just saw guys, when I was out shopping the other day, they walked through the store in their fire gear. And I was like, I remember when I got hired 14 years ago, it wasn't like a big deal if you did that necessarily, like going to Jewel or whatever. If you were coming back from a call, you just go in the store. And now I almost went up to him and be like, hey, you bunch of heroes, can we chill out a little bit? And I know your boots are in the truck. Can you put your boots on and walk through instead of wiping your pants on the eggs? You mind? And but I think that perspective only comes with time, and in your case, education. Like, you have to go way out of your way to look for this stuff. So what did you start reading about that you really narrowed in on, and I could just read, where you almost thought I want to change my whole paper on this? Was there one aspect of this that you really kind of latched onto?
So as I kept researching, it transformed to the infertility stuff, and then for me personally, I took a selfish approach. What do I have to worry about?
Yeah.
And really, the big thing that I was man, I never thought of was coming back to shift after pregnancy, after having a baby, and then pumping and breastfeeding.
Oh my God.
Stuff I never thought about, but
Yeah.
That was like a big deal. And I was like, man, I could write 40 pages on this alone.
Oh my God. I'm just trying to think of the logistics of it now, and it's a non-starter for me. Like, I think of that puzzle, and I'm like, that's one of those things where, like, I'll figure out when I get there. Like, I can't even start to put the pieces together about pumping, preserving it on shift. And now that you're even talking about what cortisol does, like, is it good? Like, is the milk even good?
No,
like,
and then throw in a fire here or an exposure.
Right.
You know, they're like, dump it, you know, like.
Yeah.
It's not good. They say, like, typically the big number that I found was like minimum of 3 days. Dump all that milk. Like,
from when you work?
And dump it, especially if there's a fire or whatever, because all the
cow.
hazards, all that soaks into our skin, all that stuff from our gear and stuff is going to be transmitted through breast milk.
Really?
So.
That's a massive amount of potentially a massive amount of breast milk.
Yeah.
3 days. I mean, but you're back to work.
Right. To start it all over. Yeah.
Like, just did the quick math in my head. You only have 2 days off, right? At the most 5 if you have a Kelly day. Not the most, but geez. So when you were going through all your research and starting to write your paper, did you develop a purpose for it besides completing your master's project? Was it like, did it start to take shape of something? I was like, okay, this is going to be my resource. Like you said, you started looking for selfish reasons, which I think you should. That's why, I mean, a long time ago, we were talking about, like, that's how firefighters or paramedics solve their own problems, is you try to find someone with the same problem and solve their issue, right? Even though you don't want to look at your own. Or did you start to look at this and be like, wow, this can really be a resource for the industry or my department? Or where did you kind of see the scope of this thing going as you were creating it?
Well, a lot of people, like, had to tell me as I was working on it, you know, they're like, this will be a good resource for other people. You know, whether I use it, whether the next person uses it, it's just that now that there's information there that we can't ignore, you know, once it's brought up, you know, people want to avoid this conversation. It's few and far between the amount of people that it affects on a department, you know, when it comes to actual policies and stuff.
Yeah.
Is very limited. So a lot of people are like, no, this will be good. This will be good. And I was somebody that was like, no, I'll stay out of it. Like, leave my name off of it. I don't want to make waves. I don't want to cause issues and stuff. But then it's like, no, as, you know, I'm getting further along, it's like, no, that's important. You know, that's important. Like, I'll get in trouble for it. I'll take the hit for it, you know, but it's like, there needs to be change eventually.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a get in trouble thing. It can be. It can definitely be a get in trouble thing. But it comes down to your approach, like everything else, you know. The process is everything. And I think you have, first of all, this is the most females we've ever had working in our city. The youngest they've ever been, right? It's when I came on, there was one older female that was a year away from retirement, and 2 in their 40s maybe, right? And that was it. Now there's 5 or 6 of you guys all in your 20s to 30s. I mean, you're going to inherit the department in no time, and it's going to be yours to make. Have you started going down the path of, like, let's try to get some of this stuff in there? And
I'm definitely stuck between, like, let's not make it a thing until it is a thing, you know, which, you know, you don't want to draw attention to a potential issue before it's relevant.
Yeah.
Because still we're talking about that, right? We have the most females we've ever had, but if you look at the numbers, we're still at, like, only 3 that have a potential for this to affect. So we're still at such a small number of over 130 guys we're talking about affecting 3 people.
Yeah.
So it's still a conversation that people don't want to have. And I think, you know, the best way to go about it is to start it in the station and start it on shift, which has started because people have asked about what I'm doing, what I'm researching, which is huge. You know, like having a casual conversation about it before it goes up. But I think still it's hard, like, not drawing attention to it without it being like, oh, is that a thing yet? You know, like having to deal with all of that. And then unfortunately, I think, like, the process of how you go about something is a big thing. But people don't want to talk about this. And unfortunately, I think it affects a lot who you are, you know, like what your goals are, what your aspirations are, who you are, you know, affects what is the potential outcome.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't think that's any secret. If you can criticize and throw rocks from the bottom and keep pointing out problems, or you can come with solutions, you know, and automatically those people that come with solutions, whether they're good or bad solutions, get not favoritism, but they get looked at more seriously as people because they're contributing members, right? So why don't you drop some, I know you said you read your paper last night just to prepare for this congressional hearing. Drop some facts and figures then, right? What stands out to you, or what do you like to highlight when you're talking about this stuff, or what kind of shocked you the most as you were going through?
So the biggest thing initially with the infertility stuff was that firefighters straight out were 50% more likely to seek infertility help over the general population. So that's a big number right there that automatically, regardless of the issues, that you are seeing that group of people seek out help more.
Okay.
And then what's alarming for me was that just working this job, whether you're 1 day pregnant, 2 weeks pregnant, 6 months pregnant, you have over doubled % chance of miscarrying than everybody else. So that number jumped up to almost 30% chance of miscarrying.
Wow. Was there any indicator of on average how many miscarriages it would take to have a live birth then, or was there anything like that, or was it basically risk mitigation and just do your best until something terrible doesn't happen?
There wasn't a number exactly, like you have to have 5 miscarriages before you're going to have a successful pregnancy, but it's seeking out that infertility help and getting all that extra medication and help and stuff to help make a pregnancy last. But there definitely is research about the chance of miscarrying your first pregnancy to your second pregnancy, and those numbers did waver a little bit, that the chance did go down the number of pregnancies you had.
Okay. I mean, it's definitely uncomfortable, but it's valuable because at least you can have an outlook on stuff, right? Like no one wants to know, like, first handful might not work, right? But at least if you have the information, like as you go through it, your chances get better, and there is a path that you're going down. I think that takes away it won't take away a lot of sting. It gives you a little bit of hope towards the end, right? And that was the big thing for us, was once we started figuring it out slowly but surely, at least there was like a path we could follow at some point, like some sort of path we're going down. And that made the next like year easier. Whereas before that, it was just like, well, I don't know, like who else can we go talk to, or what other hospital we have to go to now, you know? What other facts and figures stick out as you're going through this that kind of influenced the way you started researching it or drove your research?
So I started looking a lot at when restrictions should actually take place during a pregnancy.
Okay.
So, split up into trimesters. In the first trimester, most of the time people don't even know someone's pregnant at that point. People aren't telling anybody, you're keeping it a secret. And that is actually the time that the baby is most susceptible to outside exposures and hazards.
Okay.
So it was like, if there was any point that you were going to go off, it should probably be in that first trimester. And then even further along is that once you hit 20 weeks, so about halfway through, like, you shouldn't be climbing a ladder because your balance is different. And you shouldn't be repetitive lifting, repetitive bending over, which is all of our job. Any medical call you go on and anything like that, you're bending over, you're lifting, even in limited capacity.
Yeah.
So then it's a struggle between what's going to be best for not only me, but the crew. Like, because I don't want to be a nuisance, a hazard. And when you do this job, like, everybody should be equal on the team. I definitely don't want to be the weakest link. So if I'm not pulling my weight, then it's like, okay, it's time to step back and not be a part of that anymore.
Yeah. Do you think, so there's a big movement now in the strength and conditioning world and the fitness world of like, the pregnant and postpartum athlete is its own designation, right? And one of the things that we're seeing more and more, which I really like, is that they're coming out and basically professing to women how much stronger they are than what they've been told. And there's all kinds of like funny anecdotal examples, like, this pregnant lady goes and picks up her 5-year-old and carries her groceries in and does this, but she's not allowed to lift more than 20 pounds with her personal trainer, So where do you think that line is between, or the differentiator between working on shift and having to pick up one person that weighs 200 pounds, but 4 other people are helping you, and going off work, but still maintaining physical fitness and challenging yourself with squats or deadlifts or anything like that?
Yeah. So there was a lot of changes in that, like, especially recently, as you say, that like, it's okay for a pregnant person to work out. And especially it's a lot based on what your body is used to. So hopefully in this field, like, people have a decent level of physical fitness, you know, and
We're working on it. Yeah.
They say for the most part, like if you're used to working out 5 to 6 times a week, you can maintain that. You can persist that and prolong it throughout your whole pregnancy as long as you're feeling up to it and there's no other outside factors coming in on that. Yeah. But additionally, they say like you should be limiting jumping and stuff like that. Like your heart rate should not be in that 90%.
Right.
You know, shouldn't be that high. You can still maintain a good workout and lift, but maybe slow things down, be more purposeful. And a lot about your core work is what they've transformed, like working out while pregnant is making sure you're maintaining a good core. So doing breathing exercises and properly warming up and slowing down your lifting so that you're bracing your core properly and relearning how to do that stuff to protect.
Yeah. I think there's going to be a lot of guys who are like, I think there's still going to be a mental disconnect for the pure fact that they just see it as working. Like, oh, you can work out, then you can keep working on the job, right? But nowhere in that will they potentially identify, like, you can't just take a break when you're on the job. Like, when Katie was far along in her pregnancy, or even halfway through her pregnancy, she's like, I just need a minute. I'm walking up these stairs slow because my back hurts and I'm breathing heavy because my blood volume is doubled and I just need a minute. But there's no room for you to take a minute when we're reef-sleeving someone down the stairs, right? And the other part of that they mentioned is you can keep a moderate intensity workout, whatever you're accustomed to, but you're going into it with an expectation of the workout, with built-in rest in there, and the ability to moderate it back. And nothing's going to jump out and scare the shit out of you halfway through. And you're not just going to be sitting in your house and then someone sets off an air horn and tells you to go to work out, right? So there's a lot of external factors that surround the actual call that I think you called it before. There's non-modifiable risk factors. And that's what separates working out versus working while you're pregnant, I think. And do you think a lot of people are going to recognize that, or will it just be considered like, if you can work out, you're stronger than you think, you'll be fine for a while?
I think there's definitely going to be a distinct line. You know, like the older guys that are far removed from their wives being pregnant are going to be like, oh no, it was fine 15 years ago. You know, like they just did what they did and it was fine. And they are more far removed, so they, don't remember it as well or as vividly, you know. But on the flip side, I've had other guys come up and be like, oh yeah, man, like when my wife was 6 weeks pregnant, she was taking a nap for 3 hours at noon. And it's like, yeah, if I come to work, I can't do that. I can't bank on that. Yeah. And I know you've talked about it in some other episodes, is that like once the tones go off, our heart rate automatically jumps up and like how long our heart rate is going to rest there. So if we're already starting from an elevated heart rate and then having to do some sort of work, whether it's just carrying a patient, whether it's walking around for a fire alarm carrying in gear carrying equipment and stuff like that, you're already at an elevated level and now you're working harder than you would have if you just walked into that building.
Yeah, and I keep going back in my mind just the element of surprise. Like you said, the one female that we knew, she almost got kicked in the stomach. Like you can't, it's a completely unregulated environment we're going into. We like to pretend it's like a more controlled environment in the ambulance and all that, but we're still dealing with a person that's not under our control. And that element of surprise of both the environment and the people we deal with is just so risky for regular people. I mean, I hurt my back, me and Chris Kennedy, when I was driving him around on Ambulance 5. We went to this autistic kid who was nonverbal, and he was just having a tough time. He was just very upset, and he was in a chair in the front yard of his house, and we were going to put him in the stair chair. And the mom was like, I'll keep him calm. You guys just lift him from this chair to this one. It's no big deal. So we put this chair next to him, and I was on the stair chair side, so I was reaching across the stair chair, and she was talking to him, and he was just sitting there calm. And so we scooped him like underneath the armpit and underneath the knees. And me and Chris were just going to move him over to the stair chair. And he was totally cool with it. Like, we're going to touch you, and we're going to lift you up from here. And he kind of like acknowledged us. And as soon as we lifted him up, he went like straight. Like he kicked his heels forward and his head back, and it just pulled my back sideways. And I had like a massive spasm in my back, you know. The kid weighed like 40 pounds. And he took me down. Like I was useless. I was like on all fours in the lawn, like trying to catch my breath because my back was spasming. So to encounter a 40-pound kid that's unpredictable when I'm in okay shape, I can't imagine Katie wrestling something like that, or a 200-pound drunk guy, or pulling me out of a building or going to cut a hole, when she's 2 months pregnant. It's just, you think it's realistic because they're used to the job, but I think it's unrealistic. I think it's I think it's pretty silly to expect that. So how far did you get into? Well, first of all, are there any more numbers that you remember or you want to throw out there? And
no, those are the big ones.
Those are the big ones. Okay. How far into the recovery side of this did you get, or did you start looking at? Okay, so once you have that cortisol spike, and you go home the next day, did you identify things that you can do the next day to get better, mitigate your risk a little bit, kind of repair some of the damage you did in the 24 hours before?
I mean, it's all the stuff that everybody is told to do,
Sure.
Meditate, deep breathing, get a workout in. But it's a lot of times, we might use a hard workout, go for a run, get that heart rate up, get out all that stress and stuff. And it's well, you can't really be doing that kind of activity, so you lose a lot of your outlet for working out all of that stuff.
So you have to diversify kind of your outlets then, right?
Yeah.
Sounds frustrating.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, it sounds very frustrating because you're basically identifying that you're not as able to do your job as you want to. Then you go home and you can't do the things that you want to do to feel better about not being able to do your job.
Which is hard, because, if we look at it, women being in the fire service is such a small thing. And it's and now we want all this stuff, now we're going to ask for changes. We're going to ask for a little bit of leeway, so that's hard in itself, and getting guys on board with that. You want to get into some of this policy stuff, how it's going to go if let's say I ask for light duty at 10 weeks pregnant.
Okay.
What do you think's going to happen?
If you okay. So if you came to me and I was I'll say assistant chief because I don't want this problem. I'm going to pass it up the chain.
Yeah, fair.
But I'll identify it. If you came to me and said, well, first of all, is this the first time I'm learning that you're pregnant?
So that's a whole nother half of things is how do you handle, what's the proper way to handle bringing this up the chain?
So from my side, I always err on the side of more communication, right? But that's super tough because if I'm a chief, I understand that people already kind of distrust me to an extent, and they expect me to side with the city or the municipality to a larger extent, right? So I think a lot of people see the chief as a risk mitigation factor, first and foremost. So a lot of it will come down to the legwork beforehand. Do you trust me enough to come and say, I got this thing going on, it might be a factor 10 weeks from now? And then also feel comfortable enough where if it doesn't go well, we can have the conversation too of thanks for telling me, I know this really sucks. Let me know in the future what we need to do, right? So that being said, I wouldn't expect anybody to come and tell the chief before 10 weeks that they were pregnant.
Right.
But it would make it much easier if you did. Because saying hey, I'm pregnant and by the way, I'm leaving. Figure this out in 2 days because I'm not coming back next shift. That'd be a whole nother can of worms.
Well, add in the infertility stuff. Yeah. Now you want, 10 weeks is relatively soon. You don't find out you're pregnant until 4 weeks. So then you have 6 weeks to really work with. And at that point, you really don't know viability of a pregnancy at all. Yeah. So then you want somebody, imagine when you guys were going through all your stuff, that you had to come to the chief and be like, hey, we're trying to get pregnant, but might happen in a month. It might happen in 2 years. I really don't know. And you're trying to get promoted and you're trying to get that stuff. Where does that all factor into what's the right thing to do? What's the best thing for you personally to do? Mm-hmm. What is the right approach to other guys you work with? Yeah.
Well, I would say the natural, now this is harsh. In my mind, if I was making the rules and I needed to think about when to handle this, well, this sounds so bad. Until 20 weeks hits and there's a viable child, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, for sure.
Does that sound bad?
No, it does sound bad, but I get it.
Okay.
And that's
it feels terrible to say, but I just don't know I don't know what to do with it.
Where a lot of this research and study came from. And luckily I think I'm pretty understanding, I'm pretty understanding of both sides.
That's why you're here. Yeah.
Because I think it's crazy too. If you even now you're what are they doing? Yeah. That's absurd. But then you start looking at the legal requirements.
Okay.
So like what is actually required? And there's that whole like hot topic term right now, like reasonable accommodations. Like what falls into reasonable?
Yeah.
So if you look at our history, when guys are getting light duty because they broke their arm while playing hockey, while they broke their arm in a car accident, while they, whatever, and they're given light duty on a second notice for 6-8 weeks at a time. It's like, so if we're able to accommodate that, how can you say that this is not a reasonable accommodation? And I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Oh, yeah.
I would have handled it just the same and would not have asked for light duty until, third trimester.
Sure.
And then it's less of an issue. You're over that 20 weeks of viability. You're over that stuff. And then it's like, okay, we don't want this pregnant lady working anymore. She can barely walk up the stairs.
Get her out of here.
So that's a factor too. But then it's like, once you know some of this information, how do you, if you're going to do it for a guy that got injured doing something stupid.
Hockey's not that stupid.
Well, sorry. And also, which I don't think we talk about a lot with light duty, is that these are medical issues. Like, all this stuff can be held as private as we want, as not private as we want.
Sure. So that's actually, I don't want to get off topic. Do you think it's unfair to classify pregnancy as an injury?
I don't know. Like, I don't have any issue with that. Like, if you want to go with, like, definition of an injury, like, decreased capability to work, to perform in the proper job duty, I would say that, that is a injury. The pregnant lady cannot do the same things as they were doing or as that everybody else is doing. And then I think it does even more fall into that category of why they need light duty and stuff like that.
Well, because we push for mental health stuff to be approached as if it was a physical injury, right? Yeah. And I think it's another category that I think a lot of people would take exception to that too. Like if you're like, all right, fill out your injury paperwork for being pregnant, if you're like, I'm not injured. Like, well, this is how we can categorize it to make
and
this
if
happen.
That works, I think we're at a point in society and in the fire service that like whatever is gonna fly is gonna, So what if it's categorized as an injury? To me, that's like minuscule, minor details that makes no impact on the greater result.
And I think that's a lot of the thinking that we talked about before is like take your wins as they come. And that's that's a lot of my way of thinking. Inevitably, if we had someone else sitting here, they'd be like, you can't do that because it sets a precedent on this and blah, blah, blah. But like, I don't know that, but I know that Megan's not going to be working after 10 weeks. Yeah. Which is the important thing, right? Man, I still feel bad about saying less than 20 weeks. Or after 20 weeks, it's
but that opens it up for conversation because for any person, it's like, and I've even talked about it hypothetically, it's like, my family might not know I'm pregnant, but I'm going to ask for light duty at work. It seems absurd.
Well, it's also backwards because if anything, like you said, the first trimester is the most risky, right? Mm-hmm. So me thinking like risk is lower before 20 weeks, it just shows the lack of education is like, why wouldn't you make concessions till viable fetus is there? But in reality, it's the opposite. Yeah, sometimes to get to that point, you have to, you change your life. Like if you think about your pregnant wife, you don't go out drinking, you don't, you alter those things. So to this, really, like working is just as much as a hazard as drinking alcohol while pregnant. Yeah. So when you look at it in that terms, it's like, whoa, okay. Like I would put it even more restrictive. I would put pregnancy far more restrictive than a broken leg.
Right.
You can still go out and drink with a broken leg.
Right.
First, I'd consider a far more severe injury than a lot of broken bones that we've had that have gotten light duty. So then what? What do you do?
What do you do is the question.
Now what? Like, do you lay the tracks before there's an issue? So it's there, or how do you start these conversations and where do you start them? You said the kitchen table, right? Yeah. That gets so far.
But it opens, at least I feel like it goes better if you have some people on your side, like some people that are a little bit more educated and just having this conversation with you, you're like, oh, I didn't think about that or stuff like that. So I think just in general, just as any other topic, the more people you talk to, the more people that are going to maybe learn a little bit or ask more questions. The more questions, the better. So I think if it opens that conversation, just starting it as being a conversation where people are a little bit more willing to talk about it can be tenfold for everything else that's going to happen.
Well, I definitely have some ideas. I don't want to necessarily record them.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a way to do it. But it's very specific to where we work, Right. Do you think in the end this is going to be a union driven thing?
No, I think it's going to take years to get to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think realistically, by the time we get anything formal, I think I'll hopefully be done having kids.
Okay.
I think we're years and years out. And even if you just look at contract stuff, our contract is good for another 3 years.
Yeah.
So we're at least 3 years out. And then you're looking at maybe starting to talk about for the next contract. And it's like, well, if we're just starting to talk about it, it's definitely not going to happen in that contract. So now we're at least 6 years, 2 contracts away from possibility of getting this. And a lot of guys, unfortunately, like I talked about this with some guys the other day, and the response was, well, I've been asking for stipends for special teams. And I said,
Jesus.
I think this is, personally, I think this is a little bit more important. Like, yeah, I know that this affects a smaller group of people, but hey, let's put in maternity, paternity leave. It doesn't have to be just one, but let's start somewhere. Yeah. And some departments around us have gotten in this into their union contracts, which is a good start, so we can try to mirror them as we all do. So that's huge.
I can even see it, though, starting as like a labor management thing. Planting the seed there, and then it gets hashed out, and you never know what the chief is like. Yeah, it's within my power to do that. This makes sense to me. Instead of waiting 9 years to do it. I have no idea.
Right, and I think a lot of it is how much people know about what's going on.
Yeah.
Which can work to, advantage and disadvantage.
Well, I definitely think it's a minefield. But it's not. I mean, you guys aren't going anywhere.
Right. Good, bad, or not.
You're pretty much here now. Are you willing to be the educational face of this thing?
I don't know is the answer. I'd like to say no, but I don't know if I have that in me, unfortunately. This is a pretty important thing, at least to me.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going to deal with infertility stuff. You're going to spend so much time, stress, money, energy trying to get pregnant to risk it to work an extra 6 weeks at work.
Sure.
What is the point then? So it's like, maybe I do take it on, the heels, and it's like, I fight for what I want within reason, not trying to stir the pot, anything like that. But, ask for light duty at 10, 12 weeks.
Yeah. And
see what happens and double down, but it's like, then it's also preserving time off because we have nothing for that, and it's like, guys, now you're seeing use sick time, whatever, to take at least a month off to stay home. Mm-hmm. It's like, people aren't even cleared for 6 weeks after pregnancy. So that's like, if you work up to the day you give birth. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, you only have 6 weeks of time to figure out. So I've started banking trades, stuff like that, preparing, but it's like, you can't always do that. You can't always prepare. That's a lot of time and forethought, to start setting yourself up for that. Yeah. Well, I think one thing you do have on your side is the numbers, the information. And like the actual information, right? Because I know for a fact that our administration and a lot of people don't operate on emotion. Like, you can make the most passionate speech you want, but if you don't have the numbers to support you, it's not going anywhere. Right. And I don't think those numbers are going to change. Like, they'll get updated, but they're not going to change because the job's not changing, right? Right. You're not going to significantly see any decrease or less of a risk. Yeah. So what... I don't want to be like, reach out to Megan. She'll come out. You can go on like the Joe Galley tour with him and like go station to station, make people feel really bad, or really educated. Right. But it has to start as a conversation somewhere, and that's where I think it all starts. Like getting some sort of information out there and people being willing to talk about it and ask questions. So what advice would you give now, not to get too personal, but as your journey continues, right? Like I said, it's easy for me to look back on it and be like, oh yeah, we can talk about this, no problem, blah, blah, blah. Right. But in the moment,
was not talking about it. And even now, I'm pretty guarded with the details of it. Just because I think we're still going through it. I think we still have a lot to figure out. But do you have any advice for people?
Educate yourself.
Okay.
Try to prepare as much as you can. Like if you think that pregnancy is a possibility for you, whether you're male, female in this job, like get a little bit educated to at least prepare yourself mentally, physically, all of that. So you know what you're going into. So it's less of a shock. You can try to get rid of some of that added stress that's going to come with all of that. And then just be as open as you can, like get a good group of guys to talk to, being willing to understand and talk to you about stuff and what they went through when their wives were pregnant, and you're finding that maybe younger guys are a little bit more understanding about, oh yeah, like my wife at 10 weeks, I couldn't imagine her carrying 2 pounds up the stairs, it's like, yeah, so do you want to work with me when I'm in that situation? Like what's the difference? Like making that correlation there where I think guys, you touch on that sympathy, like they're more emotional when it's their family and it's like, well, would you want your wife doing this?
Right.
So turning it into that. So just get yourself educated, ask questions, see what your department, city has, Yeah. We are still city employees, so see if there's anything there.
Well, I think you bring up a good point. There's nothing wrong with just asking questions. Like, you don't have to walk into this thing as like an instigator of like knocking the doors down and seeing what havoc you can wreak, And I suppose that'd be my advice from like the officer side of it is, this is absolutely something that is going to be a unique experience for the 1 to 3 people on the department going through it, right? But, and I don't mean to do the false equivalency thing, other people in the department have gotten stuff done that's been very difficult in the past, right? And those people you're probably still working with them every day, and maybe not even knowing it, like the stuff that's been accomplished by people that we just work with. Right. Then when we start hearing stories about like how this came to be, you're like, that guy did that? I thought that was just the way it is. We're like, no, it completely turned over the system. So you don't have to go into it adversarially, regardless of your opinion on what the administration's role is or what they embody or what they represent. And I almost promise that there's someone on the department who's been in a difficult situation that had to work around some roadblocks to get something done. And it's just a matter of finding that, like you said, surround yourself with a good group of people and finding those people that have got stuff done and figuring out how stuff gets done at your department. And if you're willing to play within those frustrating rules, and I think you can get a lot done. If you want to walk in and start throwing darts at everybody and pissing people off, then
you're not going to get
like
anything.
You said, the job isn't going to change,
Yeah.
And especially won't change no matter how much you beg for it after you piss people off. So
yeah, you definitely can't go in expecting that things are going to change. Like historically, change is bad and change takes a long time. So you can't go in thinking that just because you feel one way that other people are going to agree. Like this is a very sensitive, unpopular thing that people don't want to talk about. It doesn't affect them. They have no personal input in it because, well, their wives had to deal with it. So you can't go in thinking that things are going to change or people are going to feel the way you feel. You can't go in thinking that. Yeah,
we get angry that like little stuff doesn't change. Like we don't buy the right dish detergent for some people and they get pissed off.
Right.
So the hopes that someone's not going to get mad because their child is at risk is like, oof, good luck. Like I think you're in the minority of people I've talked to that can argue and see both sides, but it was such a emotional issue for sure.
Which I think is important for anything. In any, girl coming in, you can't think that you're going to change, a majority of men's opinions or how they operate, nor should that be the answer. That's not your job here. And I think if you go in with that mindset that you're different or you're a minority, then you open yourself up for discrimination, for issues, for not getting along with guys. Like it's a mindset thing in my opinion. Like if you go in that you're different, you're going to be different and that's going to be an issue, for everybody, for you, for the guy you're sitting next to. But if you go in like, hey, I'm here to do the job just as you are, then you're on a level playing field from the beginning.
Now it's a delicate balance, right? Because Kate Foster said, hey, we're women and we're different.
Yeah.
Right?
Kate and I have talked about this.
Okay.
So.
But it's that balance between the two of like, let's not pretend like they're guys.
Right. Yeah.
But
it
also,
definitely is a hard balance.
But also, let's not pretend like they're girls.
Right.
I don't know. Is that the right way to put it?
I guess. There is no right way is the answer.
Thank God.
And that's why I
Thank God, because I'm screwing this up big time.
Yeah. And that's why I think that an issue like this is so hard, and that, like, you're like, do you want to be the face of this? No, I don't. Like, I want to be just as everybody else.
Yeah,
you know,
I understand.
like, I wish that the way that other guys had, went through infertility and getting their wife pregnant, I wish I could deal with it like that and show up to work and call in when I have a doctor's appointment and go on with my married life.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, this time it is different,
Yeah, I think that ties it back, and it's not. That's two individual issues we're working through, right? But that's what I explained at the beginning. Like, I have no interest in it.
Yeah.
I have zero interest in it. And the stuff that we went through, we had the opportunity to be a little more of a advocate for it. And we were both like, I don't think so. We're just going to get through this thing. And it was selfish, I think, but it was also like necessary of like, no, we're
self-preservation.
Thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, you don't want to put your problems, your concerns, your feelings, your emotions out there for everybody else to nitpick, to have opinions about.
There's that. There's also the point of like, once we figure out the solution, it was like, no, we're moving past this. Like, I don't want to keep talking about this for the next 10 years or whatever. I don't want to be a reference for this or
have it be brought up consistently.
Yeah. Like,
and
I want to
question.
I want this to be a chapter, and we're
closing it,
moving on.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. But yeah, I understand. And but I hope you enjoy being the face of it for the next
thanks.
couple of years. Anything else you want to say or leave with us or anything?
I think that wraps it up.
Oh, thank God. Will be some careful editing in this one.
Yeah. Good.
Take out the part where I sound like a fucking monster.
You should leave that in.
Oh my God, dude.
Because other people feel the same way.
It's just a bad knee-jerk. I don't even know if it's a knee-jerk reaction. It's just the first thing you can correlate it to.
Right. That's in numbers, though. When you talk about numbers being what you have to back your information up with. Like, that's a numbers thing. That's written in paper,
Yeah, and you have to dispute that number.
Right.
Oh, God. All right, I'm stopping recording this.